Don?
Good afternoon. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Let's get my slide to advance here. Come on. There we go. Okay, I'm Don Katzen, CEO of Evergreen, and with me is Jeff Benedict, who heads up our ITSM practice as well as our innovation efforts. If you're new to our series, welcome. If you're a past attendee, thanks for joining us. Our goal, as always, is to share valuable information and insights you can use in your planning and activities today. The topic we'll explore today is fresh thinking on IT self-service. Here's our agenda. After a very little bit about Evergreen, we'll dive into it, and then beyond that, we'll briefly demonstrate some of the concepts discussed in our always evolving view of a very advanced self-service catalog and portal experience, which is built on ServiceNow. Then we'll open it up for questions, as Stephanie said. Evergreen is a U.S.-based consulting firm, and we've worked with hundreds of mid-market, Fortune 1000 companies and public sector organizations to help them improve their IT service management execution. We have both process and technology in the firm, so it's a full life cycle company. We are one of the top 5 U.S. ServiceNow partners, and we have over a decade of domain experience in each area of the ServiceNow portfolio. But we view all of that from a perspective that we call customer-centric IT service management. At Evergreen, we think traditional ITSM thinking is wrong because it puts the customer, the people we're actually doing this for, in last place. And you might question, how could this happen? And there's a number of reasons for it. One is that tradition. This is how it's always been done. Another, we don't know how to put the customer first. What do we do? What are the best practices? How do we build it? And then third, we do know traditional ITSM really well, so we do that. Unfortunately, we think it's wrong. We need to start with the customer. If we do so, it changes what we do. In incident, rather than thinking about how to handle incidents, we might focus on how to eliminate or automate them. In change, rather than always thinking about managing change, we might think about how to eliminate or streamline it. In knowledge, and you have heard this probably before if you've been on here, we can make that something much more powerful called search and learn, a place for powerful social self-enablement. So if we start with the customer, we can change what we do as well. We create and use a lot of tools and artifacts in our consulting work. Over the past couple of webinars, I mentioned some of the guides we use every day. One is our Services Definitions Dictionary, and the other is our Service Taxonomy Use Guide. And quite a few of you requested it, so I thought I'd highlight them again briefly. For the dictionary, just so you know, we did review all the ITIL definitions and extracted out any related to services, design, delivery, and management. Then we added or extended definitions where ITIL was not sufficient. And then last, believe it or not, there are some ITIL definitions that we don't recommend you use, so we broke it into 2 sections, recommended and not recommended. For the taxonomy guide, you know, anyone can manage 10 services, but if you get 100 or 200, it can get a lot harder. But it's important to prevent duplication and confusion. So this guide may help you from that standpoint. It explains the purpose and use of the taxonomy, provides a set of relevant definitions, high-level best practices, and an example of a structure that works well for organizing IT services and requests. So if these are of any interest to you, I'll tell you at the end how you can get a copy. Self-service. In IT, it's powerful, wonderful, efficient, and rarely used. Mark Parisi captured it perfectly here. I think this is more or less how we see self-service in IT. It's better just to personally do all the manicures than to have the cats carrying up the joint. Here's a couple of definitions for today to help us get on the same page. I actually really only pulled 2, customer and self-service. It's interesting to note, as I was looking, the term self-service is not defined in ITIL. So I started with customer, someone who buys goods or services. Then I went to Webster's for self-service, and it sounds kind of like it's straight out of the 1950s. And this one gave me a laugh. The serving of oneself as in a restaurant or gas station with goods or services to be paid with a cashier's check or a coin-operated mechanism. Does it sound like what you do every day? The only non-self-service gas stations I know of are in New Jersey, and the last time I was there, they weren't taking any cashier's checks. So we go to Wiki to get a more current definition of self-service, which centers on customer service interactions using automation, over the phone, web, or via email. That seems a bit more kind of on target what we're after. So the big question here is, why does IT want self-service? We've been talking about self-service for a very, very long time. It's nearly entirely based on what IT wants. Cut cost, cut cost, cut cost, right? Every day, week, month, and year. That's what we hear. Do more with less, and then do a little bit more with less, right? It's certainly not entirely our fault. It's drilled into our heads. So we hope self-service is a way to do these things. And oh yeah, if there's any time left over, we want our people doing higher value work. So that's kind of how it's felt, I think. But these are the old reasons from the past. There are better reasons for this. While this may not have been fully embraced by your organization yet, and I'm not surprised if it hasn't, enlightened IT organizations are seeing it and they're moving fast. It's coming for the rest of us. The consumerization of IT is happening. We all experience it, and our customers do. They see a much better way in their personal experiences, and their unrest is steadily rising. IT does not have to do everything. It only needs to provide access to valuable services. The grocery store doesn't make everything on the shelves. They buy a lot of it, and they resell it. IT is a grocery store. IT is a broker of awesome functionality to be consumed by its customers in a safe, easy way. And like a grocery store, if a particular product is no longer very desirable, and I put in parentheses, think legacy systems, well, they pull it off the shelf because the shelf space is too valuable to waste. This perspective, if we adopt it, changes IT. It releases our attachment to what's being provided and focuses on what should be provided, which then changes us from reactive and defensive to proactive. IT begins to see opportunity to lead innovation, to explore what its customers might need to do better, and bring it to them to fuel creativity. IT evolves to seeing its role of connecting customers with capability. I think that's a great phrase, connect customers with capability. That's what we're here to do. So what do our customers think about self-service, right? For those of us who may have experimented with it, we might say something like, well, we built it, but the customers won't use it. The question is, why not? Is it because the customers don't like self-service? Well, there was a 2012 survey done by Amdocs, contracting with a firm called Coleman Parks, that interviewed 2,900 smartphone users in the U.S. and Canada. 75% of them prefer online support to speaking with someone, providing the online support is good. A staggering 91% would use an online knowledge base to answer questions and triage problems if it were good. That's pretty impressive. But for the same 2,900 folks, there's a big gap. Only 37% currently even try online because it isn't very good. In fact, the same study showed that more than 40% of the customers end up calling in after they cannot find answers to their questions. According to Gartner, now this is back in 2010, 40% of the service desk contact volume could be solved by self-service, but only 5% actually is. Now, this is 5 years old, but to be honest, I haven't seen a huge increase in the effective use of self-service with the companies I meet with over the past 5 years. So people clearly do want it, but only if it's any good. And if you believe Gartner, nearly half of our interactions could be eliminated, but few really have. So the question is, maybe it's not even possible to offer good self-service. But we know that's not true. It can be done. There are great ones out there. And of course, I always mention Amazon, as you all know, but for 9 years, this is quite an amazing stat, 9 years, Amazon has been rated the #1 retail experience in the world, and you can't even talk to them. Amazing. So if we've tried and it didn't work, why not? Now here's some common reasons, and the reason for hitting these quickly is so we don't repeat these things, right? Our failures are our future pitfalls. We built it to meet our needs, our goals, not with the customer's needs in mind, which takes more work. So we did it fast, and as such, it was probably ugly, complex, and confusing. Also, since it was driven by our needs, it was reactive from the customer's perspective, as opposed to talking to them, finding out what they do need most, and building some of that. Also, since we had no time and we need to move fast, every bit of self-service we did offer was pretty quickly hand-built by whomever was providing that service. So there was no common approach or consistent look and feel to what we brought to self-service, but a bunch of rifle shots instead, which customers hate. So whether we realized it or not, it was too much work for us to do it right. So let's start fresh. As we look at how to do this better, how to create self-service that customers will like and use that also helps IT, we're really going to focus on getting started, and I want to call it phase one, as it were. This is not the end-all, be-all. This is just starting this well and getting it moving. Because some organizations do have self-service capability built, but I believe most organizations are still in the starting blocks as far as self-service options that their customers actually like and use. Since it takes time and money to build good self-service functionality, we want to make sure anything we tackle is worth it. Here's what we're looking for. High volume. If we only do something 3 or 4 times a year, is it worth the effort? Probably not. Highly repetitive. If we do it a lot, but every time it is completely different and we can't change that, then even that highly repetitive activity is not a good candidate. Is it simple and doesn't change a great deal over time? If so, it's easier to build the self-service solution and it will be viable for a nice length of time. And then last we come down to 80-20. And this is the seminal question right here. What are the 3 to 5 things that are or could be the same in any area and meet 80% of the needs? Maybe only 70% of the needs. That's close enough. This is what we are after. 80-20, 3 to 5. So now we say, where do we find these things? If we look in this lower right-hand side, here is generally we will find these things in our current interaction buckets with our customers. How-tos, status checks, requests for something, and something is not working. So this is a good place to call out one of our service design principles. Every service involves 3 constituents: the customer, the provider, and the manager, and all have to be involved and have their needs met or the service isn't viable. To achieve these goals, we follow a principle called balanced design. And it means this: if we begin by designing for the customer in a way that they love it and want to use it, we can also get what we want and have it driven by the customer's own self-service actions. Give the customer what they want to get what we need. Okay, what is at the heart of each of these constituents' needs? The customer, it's the experience. For the provider, it's execution effectiveness. And for the managers, it's governance and accountability. Now, we have a whole webinar we did on this topic in the past, and it's in our archives if you want to dig into it deeper. So next, we need to do some detective work. Keeping in mind the 80-20 principle, 80% of what we want to provide can be found in 20% of the total. Starting out, we're looking for the higher volume repetitive tasks day in, day out. So we start with the data we do have. We want to mine the top 5 or top 10 incidents. We want to look, is any one of those a combination of a couple scenarios? Is there a common thread to them? And what's the true root cause of that whole thread of incident or group of incidents? And once we understand that, now we can look to eliminate or automate through self-service, right? Is there a way we can drive that? Is there a cost-benefit consideration we want to put into play on this conversation? So you can see we want to think about these things, right? Now we want to apply the same line of thinking to the top 10 requests, the top 10 how do I kind of queries, all these things that are the interactions. So commonly what I'll hear at this point is, well, you know, we really don't know what these are, or we don't have them well enough organized that we can understand this data. And I understand that can happen, but you can still make progress. In this case is where you really do become a detective, and you go interview your level 1 folks and go interview some customers. Even if you do have your top 10 list, it's still worth doing. For the level 1, here are the kind of questions we would want to ask, and I'll be happy to get these to you. What are the top repetitive items you deal with day in and day out? What's the most frustrating thing you have to deal with? What's the most enjoyable part of your workday? What do you think customers want that we are not paying attention to? What's the dumbest problem we haven't fixed? That's really actually one of my favorite ones. If you had a magic wand, what would you change? Right? So that's a pretty good set of questions for customers. What do you like best about IT? Why? What do you like least? Right? If you could name 3 things that IT could do to make your work life better, what would they be? What's your favorite customer experience? And it could be, is it Apple? Is it Zappos? Is it Netflix? And if you had a magic wand, just like for our level 1 folks. Last, let's talk about captive needs. These are the things your customer has to come to you for. They don't have any choice. Maybe you have a lot of these, actually. They're magic because they're sticky. And as you improve what you do for them every day, they notice. So we make these captive needs better, and at some point in this evolution, it changes from having to come to wanting to come. Are you worried about shadow IT and changing the perception of IT in your customer's eyes? Then start with the sticky needs, right? These captive needs, and make them terrific. Don't see the customer as your captive, but see this instead as a magic lever to change your relationship with them. Apple recently recorded a $17 billion quarterly profit, the highest by any company ever, right? Beauty matters. Customers loving your product matters. Ask Apple. A lot of you have or may eventually use ServiceNow, and it's a great flexible platform. On the left-hand side is what the end-user experience looks like out of the box. On the right-hand side is what we bring out of the box. It is very functional, left-hand side, but it looks like it was designed by IT. No offense intended. Like the eye doctor says during examination, this or this, which is better? Which might your customer prefer? Simplicity and usability are part of a beautiful experience. Everything you might need should be close at hand, simply communicated, and readily understandable. Evergreen follows 5 core principles in the design of every aspect of the customer experience. Has to be simple, beautiful, complete, predictive, and leading. Start with a beautiful customer portal. This is step 1. This can be a significant improvement in the eyes of your customer. How do customers request services from you today? Is it a complex interaction via email or on the phone? Do they love it? If not, that's great. We can start with creating a better way for them to request services. This alone could make them happier and get them coming to your self-service portal. Notice on the upper right-hand side, we're leading the customer to quickly and easily define their problem in a way that also helps us. And at the same time, as they provide information, we're feeding them possible resolutions for self-service, self-triage on the far right-hand side. But at any point where they no longer want to interact, we offer them an easy way to exit and interact with us. Notice the chat and the phone numbers at the bottom of every page. Those are bailout points. Now, we don't have to follow this approach that we've got here on the upper right-hand side. At the bottom, we have a more direct interaction approach. It's up to you how you do it, with multiple ways for the customer to choose how and when they want to interact with us. They could have a chat, they could schedule an appointment with the Genius Bar-like capability we built in, they can go to collaborative sources, or they could submit a traditional help request, right? No matter how you proceed, there has to always be an easy button escape hatch for the customer, thus they never feel trapped in self-service. Here's another terrific Phase 1 self-service capability that can make a huge difference, the ability to check status. No one wants to be in the dark as to the status of any request, and no one likes having to call in to find out what is happening. That's usually pretty painful, and it takes a while, right? You don't like it either. It's not really a high-value activity on IT's part. So publish the progress or status of open requests to the portal. As you can see, status is very visible on the portal. Here on the left-hand side, My Requests, right? That's right there, almost front and center on the portal. And you can easily see a list of both open and closed requests here in this right-hand side, but we also have them by type. So if you only want to see requests, you can see it, incidents, approvals you've got. So it's kind of your interaction workflow with IT as a customer. As you can see also, status is very visible, right? It's not just for, and it's not just for, you see, oh, you don't see it in the drop down here. There's open records, but there's also closed records. Excuse me, I thought that was shown there. So this kind of becomes your workspace as a customer. There's often a lot of grumbling from IT when we talk about status updates. Too much detail. It will confuse the customer. Maybe we've got some inappropriate language in there, right, because someone in IT is angry and we don't want the customer to see it, right? And those are all legitimate things. But in the platform, we have the ability to publish a standard update output based on achievement of a certain functionality, so that all those concerns don't actually have to be the case, right? What is important here is to recognize that the customer wants to see progress consistent with the timeline that they were promised. They don't really care about the details, and I often get an argument on that statement, but if they see progress and they have a belief that you will deliver relatively on time, they don't usually care a great deal about the details. So as you can see on the top example, status is simple. It's 4 phrases shown in the green chevrons: approval, assess, provide, and complete. And these can be anything you want, right? It can be submit, review, in progress, complete. It doesn't really matter. The one below adds additional detail on steps. How much you show is up to you. But it's not as difficult as it's often made to be, and this can go a long way to having people, well, to getting people not calling you to check the status. So let's look at something we're calling here high-value knowledge. What we're really applying, though, is an easy way to profile some very frequent requests for easy access in the knowledge area. You know, here this list of things I want to, right, as well as some common answers that are very popular. If you notice at the top, the user can search, right? They can collaborate with the community, or they can click the red button for immediate help. As far as the easy button goes, did you notice that there are 5 different bailout points on this screen alone? So now we're going to dig a little bit deeper. Here we're looking at an example of self-service and automation for a common request. Access to Box for storage. This is something Box or Dropbox, lots of organizations want to provide for their customers, or they've got an internal capability very similar. So it's a common request. So here we have built complete end-to-end automation of this request, which in this case, just for this example, is automatically approved for this customer. The block at the top shows the task progress steps with an additional enhancement. By selecting the View Details button where the orange arrow is pointing, we can provide the step-by-step progress in much more detail to the customer. That's what's shown below, and it kind of wraps around here. It starts here: create account, provision rights, validate access, deliver account information, completed. Right, so these are the detailed steps that are actually occurring in this workflow. So by doing this, right, the customer can answer practically any question they might have as a status without calling us. And since this is an automated workflow, there's no work required to make this happen. It's just basically giving more information on what's happening to the client, right? No more work for IT. So my claim for phase 1, really what we have to do, we have to create a 10% better portal. It just has to be 10% better than what our customers have today, and they will use it. It should be simple and intuitive, easier to use, give us the ability to check status, offer a little bit of high-value knowledge that's easy to find, not thousands and thousands of things that people don't use, but high-value knowledge, and maybe a few simple high-value requests or services to get started. And then don't forget the easy button. Always make it easy for the customer to interact with you quickly. So that's all we've got to cover in our presentation today, and I'm going to turn it over to Jeff, and he can demonstrate some of these concepts in our platform.
Okay. And Jeff, as I'm handing the control over to you, I'd like to remind our participants that they use the double arrows at the top right-hand corner of the screen just above the slide that you're showing now. That will take them to full screen mode, and they will have a much larger view of what you're presenting.
Great. Thanks, Don. Thanks, Stephanie. So to echo kind of what Don hit on, I'll show a lot of what he showed in screenshots kind of through our live system here. So I'm starting with, we're in our self-service portal, and this, as a backdrop, is built on ServiceNow and built specifically on the content management system of ServiceNow. And, first of all, the portal is obviously a place where we can consume information about our services. We can submit those service requests. We can obviously track the status of those requests. I'd also highlight to some of Don's points too that this is also a vehicle where we can communicate outages, alerts, push announcements, or prescribe content to our consumers and help guide them along the way. One other thing I'd also mention about the portal, and that is becoming more of a requirement for our consumers these days, is responsiveness, being able to use the portal on multiple different devices. So you'll see an example here where we can be in an iPhone's kind of width and still be able to interact with and use things like touch events, swipe right, swipe left to interact with things like the menu. So those are things we want to make sure we accomplish within our portals as well. As Don indicated, we believe this self-service experience really should empower our customers to answer their own questions, solve their own problems. And to do this, we use a variety of techniques, such as kind of showing relevant knowledge or showing forum posts in regards to the customer's problem, as well as kind of providing them more personalized assistance from our experts. The way this page works is we're first kind of prompting the user to answer kind of what best fits your question or your problem. I'm going to start with choosing email as an example. Then I'm drilled in further to say access issue or get a new account, and can ultimately specify this further. Now, once I've gotten down to the detail of choosing a specific topic, now we start to see some new components appear onto the page. So we've got some options here to chat with an expert, to schedule an appointment. We're also showing some knowledge articles that are relevant to the topic of email access. All right, so this is using ServiceNow's chat, but we obviously could plug into other chat tools here as well, Bomgar or whatnot if need be, to facilitate that chat session. And then just I guess to highlight real quick, let me click to one of these articles. So obviously we can go out and we can look at these knowledge articles and try to solve our problems kind of through this means. But let's say hypothetically these don't solve our problems and we need to go further into this activity. All right, so I can kind of further define. Get emails on my iPad. I can further define my issue by kind of putting in a description of what I'm looking for help with in regards to this particular topic. And one of the things that happens here, interesting thing that happens here is it takes and first of all codifies or tags my description into keywords and classifications to help better look at other knowledge articles or other help or help forum content to try to find things that might be helpful to self-solve my particular issue. So I can kind of look through, there's a help forum specific to this email topic. I'm seeing some matching articles, this is helpful, this isn't helpful. I can kind of provide some feedback here to those individual elements. I can also, if I want to, I can post this to the forum itself and get feedback from my peers. Right, so I can wait for and get feedback in regards to my question. You'll see it took those same classifications and tags that were used in my kind of word matching or phrase matching and applied those here just to help improve searching and also matching other kind of elements or records throughout the system. So I'm going to say, since I'm somewhat of an impatient person, I'm going to, basically not wait for feedback from my peers. Instead, I'm going to go ahead and submit a question. But before I do that, I want to show that, I can also adjust this. My issue, I could further adjust and refine, and it's going to adjust my results and information that presents to me based off of my kind of description or issue that I'm trying to report. Let's go ahead and we'll submit this to the service desk. We'll give it a second here. And so now that I've got a new incident submitted for assistance, now I'm dropped into the status page to kind of watch the progress, respond to or provide any updates, and ultimately get my feedback and updates. So I have some options here. I can also kind of request specific contacts at a specific time. I can provide updates. I could ultimately cancel this if I solve my own problem and don't need assistance anymore. But, you know, let's say stick to the idea here that I'm impatient and I kind of want this particular incident to move along. I can drill into the view details to see kind of the details of my incident, how it's progressing. I can also use this as a way to kind of push messages to my fulfillment group. You know, like maybe I'm looking for, let's say for a status update on this incident. Right, give me some updates, people. That's what I'm looking for. And then on the back end of this, obviously we have a fulfillment group who, let me take this ticket, who can then, you know, gets notified that there's a new incident in their queue to be accepted. So we can take our help desk agent over here, Beth. She can go in here and accept this particular incident, and obviously communicate back to us that I'm, you know, looking into or issue, right? Push an update to that record. And now if I toggle back, we'll see that now I can see Beth is now assigned to my particular ticket. I get an immediate update that you know, she's looking into this particular issue. And I can use this as a way to kind of collaborate back and forth, right? And so just to kind of take this a step further, let's say Beth resolves this incident and says, you know, something like, you know, I adjusted your security settings, all should be good now, right? Something like that. Go to resolve this. I've got a couple other mandatory fields to fill out. Security change. We'll say that. And we'll resolve this particular incident. Now it's in a resolve status. If I come back into here, and I'll just refresh quickly, I'll now be able to see my new updates from Beth. I see it's now in a resolved state in my progression. And I'm also prompted for kind of an action here to kind of confirm resolution. So I can use this as a way to, you know, I could obviously say, no, this doesn't solve my problem, which if I say no, it's going to prompt me for some information to feed back to Beth to state kind of here's why it's not working even though you made this update or change. But I can also, you know, notify or note this as being resolved and closed, which now moves it into a closed status, and that overall process is complete. So I want to kind of revisit the help page just to kind of show you a different path or a different route. So I went email route for my first one, right? We also could go, in this case, asking if this is a HR-related question or topic or issue. And maybe I've got an HR policy question, so I choose that. So you'll see a little bit of a different presentation here. Now we've got a different form to submit related to HR policies. We've got different people to connect to chat with, as well as we're presenting different articles that might be helpful to self-solve my questions in relation to policies. Now, what I want to do in this situation is I actually don't want to you know, submit an incident, but I'd rather talk one-on-one kind of about my policies and make sure I'm, you know, getting the support I need appropriately. So I can schedule an appointment with an expert here, which then comes out to a calendar. So I could try to schedule something for today. Maybe I want to schedule something on Saturday. Well, it looks like the HR group doesn't work on Saturdays, so maybe I'll choose Friday instead. And I see a couple openings later in the afternoon on Friday that work for me in my calendar. So I can then, you know, schedule my appointment here. And much like my submission of an incident, I am dropped into my status page where I now have a new scheduled appointment with an HR specialist on a given date that I could cancel if I wanted to, and ultimately I'm also going to get a notification with a calendar invite with the details of how I'm going to communicate and reach out and connect with that expert or that kind of one-on-one consultation. So let me go just kind of show you a little bit behind the curtain here. So this Get Help page, these are all records in a table. So behind the scenes, you know, we've got our email access record, for example. So this allows us to kind of define, you know, what information do we want to, what questions do we want to present to the user to get help? What information do we want to reveal when they select one of these topics? And how do we want to kind of route them for assistance? So just to kind of demonstrate this, I'm just going to add a new one in here. We'll say something related to voicemail assistance. Maybe my question is, something like, is this related to your voicemail? I'll frame it in the stage of a question. I can link it to kind of a parent topic, but I'm going to blank that out so it's a top level topic. And then I'm also going to show any knowledge articles that contain the keyword of voicemail within my results. So I can add this record, and then when I refresh my page here, we'll now see I'm presented a new question here. This is related to your voicemail, which upon selection drops me into my submission form, reveals additional knowledge articles related to voicemail, as well as connects me with the experts that I've attached that particular topic to. So we kind of looked at the help side, so I want to kind of transition and kind of show service requests in a very similar process. So let me do a search for requesting access, for example. So I can search for, keyword of access. It's kind of looking at knowledge articles, catalog items, and business services. So I'm going to kind of drill in a little bit and look for just catalog items. All right, and so I kind of see, I can request access to Yammer, I can request access to Box, I see a bunch of other requests. I'm not seeing exactly what I'm looking for. So I'm going to further refine my search a little further and look for the product name of Concur that I'm looking to gain access to. So I found it. I can now request my access that I'm looking for. I'm going to say, yep, let's go ahead and order this. And the reason I need access is I need to log expense reports, for example. So I'll place my order. And as Don showed kind of in some of the slide decks, this particular one drops us into an interesting page that, and the reason we dropped into this page is that this is a request that has, is fully automated. There are no human tasks involved in this activity unless there are issues or complications with the automatic provisioning. So we're dropped into here as a way to kind of watch this thing progress through its different stages automatically. I can also kind of look at this in a different view. I've got a native ServiceNow workflow view that I can look at, which then shows me all the different steps of provisioning my account, provisioning additional rights, kind of validating our access. And then this one has an interesting step in that it's actually now in a waiting for customer confirmation. So if I come back to here, I'll kind of see if down the stretch here that it created my account, it provisioned my rights, it validated my access, and it actually delivered my account information. But now it's waiting for some action from me to validate that everything is indeed complete. So a good customer service touch point of, were there any complications? Is everything working like you expect? Right? And so one of the things I can do is I can come into my detail page for this request, and I see a lot of the same type of stuff that I saw in my incident, where I can collaborate, push messages back and forth, but I can also respond to actions that are awaiting for me. And this little button or an icon up here allows me to see the stage detail from this view as well, so I can kind of toggle my view of what's progressed and also my updates. So again, I can say yes, no. In this case, I'm going to say yes. Pushes my update in, and then if I come back to here, I should see that now my request is complete. Overall, everything has been completed and done, and I'm happy with my delivery of my access to Concur software. So that was fairly quick, but I hope this is what I hope to show today in terms of kind of demonstrating the get help and providing those different touch points, and as well as kind of delivering service from a request and access perspective. So hopefully this was helpful in seeing kind of how a self-service portal can drive this improved customer self-service and ultimately hopefully break down some barriers between the customer and the provider.
Hey, thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it. So let's see, we're back to the wrap here. For possible next steps, if you thought this might be interesting and wonder what might be a logical next step, here are some of the options from Evergreen. If you're interested, our advanced self-service catalog and portal is always available as a demo. You can find it on our website, follow the links, and you can register there, get your own login, and you can play with it to your heart's content. It's very intuitive. You can open requests, you can order things. You have to put in your charge code, and we have that tracked here. So anyhow, it's something you can go have fun with. If you're thinking about a broader service catalog initiative, but you're not sure where to start or how to get everyone on the same page, we do have a one-day workshop that's on-site in your facility for up to 15 attendees, and it educates everyone, creates common language, gets a common direction going, and can literally save months of effort in building consensus and sort of a common understanding on which to stand on. So almost all of our customers do begin this way, effectively, at some point or another. Last but not least, I did mention a couple of these things that are the artifacts that we develop and use in our daily activities and delivery with our customers. And if you'd like a copy of either one of these, then you can send us an email, reply via email, and we'll get in touch with you about that. And I think that is it for the day. We can open up for any questions we have, Steph.
Yes, and we do have a few questions. So the first one is there a specific license or module that's required within ServiceNow to take advantage of this custom self-service skin that you've shown us?
No, I mean, there are, so we, as I mentioned, we use the content management system. So from a ServiceNow licensing perspective, the content management system is part of the foundation and foundation framework. Now, where additional licenses or license kind of checks come into play are the types of use cases you might expose. So, I mean, if you were trying to, if you wanted to put, say, project management data into the portal or have someone be able to submit a demand record, then you would need to have licenses for project management and demand to support that. So the portal itself doesn't have any licensing requirements, but the use cases you may use may drive specific licenses as a requirement.
Okay, great. Don, I think this one's for you. What's the 3 biggest mistakes or the most common biggest mistakes you see with people designing their self-service portal?
The 3 biggest ones, we covered quite a few of them, but if I was to pick 3 that were to stand out, the first one would be not starting with the customer's needs, right? And that's the biggest reason why customers won't use self-service. Along with that, of course, is the fact that it's worse than the way they access a system today or the way they get help today. It has to be better, obviously. The second would be, the second biggest mistake made would be undervaluing the effort. To do it right, it takes some work, right? It's not trivial, right? It's got to be engineered correctly. It's got to be worthwhile. So there's more investment maybe than people want to think if you really go a long way into it. The third point would be, and this is probably the most important one really, is that they undervalue the potential benefit. If you think about it, if IT wants to improve its reputation and it wants customers to say IT is valuable and strategic, then it's important that the customers get value from IT, right? And that they like it, and that they're led and they're being taken places they need to be, right? And that's really what this is all about. Self-service is the ultimate expression of capability in many ways.
Okay, great. Jeff, I think I have some for you. I think you're probably the best one for this. Is it possible to include SharePoint content on the Get Help page?
I mean, short answer is yes. I mean, in the demo, you know, the knowledge content I displayed, you know, kind of as a contextual knowledge to the Get Help topics is sourced from the ServiceNow knowledge base. You know, I think the first tactic or the first possible path in terms of SharePoint content would be you certainly could import the SharePoint documents and records into the ServiceNow knowledge base as a way to kind of source that. But the other route or the other way you could do it is more of a web service based call where you know, we basically be reaching into SharePoint kind of, you know, on selection of a topic to show relevant knowledge articles and so forth. And I think the other thing we've seen other customers look at doing there in that same context is reaching out and showing things like YouTube videos that might be tutorials related to that topic. And I will say there are some third-party tools out there that play in this space, some products like Right Answers and Covio. I'd certainly recommend looking at those if you're looking at a way to kind of consolidate multiple sources of knowledge and rank them and sort them. And the other point I'll make too is that the forum content, you could say the same thing with that. You can certainly use the live feed aspect of ServiceNow, or you could integrate out to a Yammer, a Jive, or some other collaboration tool for that content.
Okay, great, thank you. Another one, Jeff, for you. Does the collaboration with the fulfiller on the incident status screen assume live bodies are actively working on the incident?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, in this case, it was back and forth between Beth and myself on those tickets. Reality is that's probably going to, you know, span over, it's not going to happen like in a real-time chat window typically unless you actually are having live bodies, you know, stand behind a chat queue and respond to things. So typically it's going to be, you know, updates that pass back and forth over a period of time, you know, and some of those validation activities occurring over a period of time. So certainly not usually going to happen. And I will say a lot of this is coupled with, you know, the standard notifications that we'd send, either email, text, et cetera. Like just to give you a quick snapshot, during my demo, I did get a number of notifications that you know, whenever I submitted new tickets as well as updates, resolutions, et cetera, that came through. So those are obviously the alternative way of me being acknowledged or notified of activities being performed on my behalf.
Okay, Jeff, I have a question from a Remedy user. It says, we currently use Remedy, not ServiceNow. Do we need to have a ServiceNow license to use this portal, or is the ServiceNow license included with the portal licensing?
I mean, I think certainly something we probably want to talk more specifically about how they would envision the ServiceNow portal working with Remedy. I mean, there's certainly ways to, you know, to basically license ServiceNow as a platform, maybe with a limited minimum set of users, and stand up the portal to kind of be the interface for ordering and requesting goods, and then have that integrate into Remedy for the back-end fulfillment. You may need some licenses for ServiceNow, some additional user licenses to cover things like maybe approvals you might perform in ServiceNow. But it would be a matter of kind of working through the specifics as to what use cases would exist inside of ServiceNow, what operations would perform there, and to what degree, what users would actually be licensable users in ServiceNow. And how much would be, you know, and which part would actually pass over to Remedy, for example.
Yeah, it's actually, we've had a number of clients where that's been the case, and not just Remedy, but front-ending other legacy support systems that are pretty large and they're embedded and they're complex and they're not ready to move from it, but they want to improve the customer experience and the interaction and deliver that whole, you know, modern service customer engagement. It's actually a pretty good way. It's almost like a cloud front end to a legacy platform, and it does work, and it doesn't require a lot of software to do it.
Great. General question, Don. Does Evergreen provide consulting services to come in and design and build the solution, or do you just train and the enterprise needs to build it?
Oh, no, we're a consulting firm. Our business is, and we actually, that's a great question, right? Because in the cloud world, consulting has changed too, and we see it more as a solutions approach. And we have platforms, we've had things we've developed, and we continue to aggressively put what we develop into our platform, and that comes at a very low price. I mean, what we sell, what's in the portal is relatively inexpensive, and that's by design, because we have that advanced set of functionality. Then we start there, and then we extend for the client into the places that aren't built into the platform, right? So we're constantly pushing that curve forward, and there's always more work at the edge of what's been done, right? And so that's kind of the premise. But Evergreen is a consulting firm, and our focus is on a solution. And you know, in the cloud world, we can take the platform a lot further and make it firmer faster than we ever could in client server. So yes, we're about solving a problem.
Great, thanks. Jeff, I think this one is for you. If we have a separate site for requesting access, how would that fit into your solution?
I mean, this is I guess that's a fairly common requirement. You know, when we set up these ServiceNow portals, that there may be links to other sites, maybe an intranet site, or maybe you use a separate system for procurement that has a self-service kind of component to it. And so typically, you know, I guess one activity is we typically would do some styling of the portal such that, you know, it may blend in with the other sites that may be transitioned to and from. Now, obviously, try not to have too big of a jarring impact on the user when they get redirected from one site to the other. I will say, I mean, ServiceNow does have some native capabilities for, setting up things like catalog items to be what are called content items as basically links to other systems. And that allows for like those items to show up in the search or the browse results, but then once you select them, you get kind of redirected over to the appropriate place to order them.
Okay, great, thank you. I'm scrolling through here. I don't see any more questions, so I'll give you folks 1 more minute to submit them. And just a reminder, you will receive an email from me with a link to the recording from today as well as the slides. And as Don mentioned, if you're interested in our Service Definitions Dictionary or our Service Taxonomy User's Guide, if you email, probably the easiest email to remember is marketing@evergreensys.com. They'll get directly to me, and I can get the appropriate person in contact with you with those documents. Again, it's marketing@evergreensys.com. Okay, I don't see any more questions, so I'd like to thank everyone for attending today, and please check the resources page on our website for the announcement of our next webinar topic. Thanks.